get that message. And we are excited that you all came here to spend your Tuesday afternoon or evening with us. So can folks see the screen okay? Great. So welcome everybody to We Matter, how to have a conversation about redistricting with community members. Just a couple of bits of meeting information and norms. This session will be recorded and sent in a follow-up email to all who registered. Please use the chat to ask any questions, share comments. We have staff and folks who will be monitoring, and we have designated time at the end to answer any questions and discuss throughout. We want you to take what is learned here and take it with you. So this is about growth, sharing it with the folks that you know, and we hope that you bring your full self. There are interactive elements, and we would love to make sure to hear from different voices. Couple of quick things of what to expect from today's session. First, I'll realize I didn't introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Guerreri with the League of Women Voters, she, her pronouns. I invite you all to introduce yourself in the chat. I'm here with friends from Center for Popular Democracy, who you'll be hearing a lot from. If you guys want to introduce yourself real quick. And friends from State Voices as well. So we will be covering redistricting and relational organizing, why we have these conversations. We will then have an overview of how to have an organizing conversation. So what are the skills and tactics and needs to have in place? There will be some time for practice, and then like I said, some share out and questions and answers at the end, but please feel free to write your thoughts and questions throughout utilizing the chat function today. So I'll hand it over to my friend, Elena.
Great, thank you, Alicia. And as mentioned, my name is Elena Langworthy. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy with State Voices. We are a national organization with 22 state affiliates across the country. And before we get into kind of the meat of the conversation today, we did just want to give some context for why organizing during redistricting can be both important and really effective. And two words that pop to mind when I think about organizing during redistricting is education and activation. Education, we know that this is important because redistricting is wonky, it's difficult to understand, and it often carries a stigma that only certain people have access or can sit at the proverbial table. There are many states that have or have had a process that by nature keeps redistricting private and out of the public view. This could be things like keeping public comment periods or hearings during work hours, or having hearings that aren't shared on easy to find locations. And all of it just kind of results in a lack of transparency that can lead to maps that really don't reflect a community. An added challenge is that congressional reapportionment only occurs every 10 years. And of course, there's a lot of changes in those 10 years. The new census data highlights that some states like Florida and Colorado have had large population growth, while others have seen big decreases. Some of these communities will now have more or less power as a result of this new data. And having impacted communities involved in the process can really ensure that maps still reflect the neighborhood boundaries that they intend to. So all of that to say, communities need a lot of education to break down the barriers of redistricting and make sure that people are informed of the process and involved in the timeline. The second part that is up on the screen right now is around activation, which we'll cover more in the next presentation. But through community organizing and education, we can find trusted community members and messages that really resonate with each neighborhood. The information can help to build a strong campaign that centers people of color and other folks who might have been left out of the process for 2011 or further. For example, there's several states that are now trying to collect stories about how communities have been impacted, both in good and bad ways, because of the districts and how they were drawn. So really connecting it to the neighborhood itself and the people themselves. The trusted leaders and messages can also help to create a strong presence at local public hearings, events, or community of interest map submissions. We know, of course, that there is a lot more power in having 50 people share a unified message at a redistricting event than, say, just like 5. And to have 50 people turn out and all have a unified message takes a lot of work to organize and educate. And so with that, I will turn it now to Ria and Julio to walk us through some of the organizing wrap.
Great, thanks, Elena. My name is Ria Thompson Washington. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. I am in Maryland. I work for the Center for Popular Democracy. And I'm going to talk about why we have to have a conversation. But before I do that, I want to introduce my colleague, Julio, to introduce himself.
Hey, all. This is Julio. Nice to meet you. I work for the Center for Popular Democracy. I go by he, him. Ria and I have been doing organizing conversations for a long time, and really think that is at the core of any good practice when it comes to like really getting our people involved. In my case, I've worked with unions for a little while and helped Make the Road Connecticut. And our work every day, no matter the issue, was having good organizing conversations so we could bring more people to the table. So what you're gonna see here today is really what we do, like every day, and it doesn't change. So after you know the structure, you know how to do this, and you're able to move a bunch of people. So, take it, record it, steal it from us. We are happy to share it and answer questions, but really pumped to be here with you and learn a little bit in this next hour.
Thank you, Julio. And I also have been organizing for about 20 years now. I started with unions, with SEIU a long time ago. And then I worked on healthcare campaigns and labor and just all kinds of like movement and justice related campaigns. And as Julio says, once you learn this wrap, once you learn this style of organizing or this piece, you're going to be able to recreate it for all types of conversations. And this is going to be a really useful tool for you to use with your community. So let's start with talking about why we need to have a conversation. So the important part of having this organizing conversation is so that people understand what the importance of redistricting is. You want to try to make sure that people who you may not ordinarily have opportunities to have conversations with are brought into this process, because we know that the community at large benefits from having more people at the table. The community at large benefits from having people participate in the conversation and having a diversity of views. So what you want to do is try to bring in as many people as possible. And the way to do that is just start with having a conversation. A lot of times people don't even realize when they're being organized, because they're just, it feels like somebody is, having a regular conversation with you and you're trying to figure out what it is that can move somebody. And the conversation piece, one of the things that's super important is that as the organizer is making sure to actively listen. So you're not just listening to respond, you're listening so that you can identify and hear the issues that people are raising, so that you can come back and use that later for like deciding how you're going to move forward. So next slide, please. So the wrap is what we call this conversation. And the wrap is essentially a script for our conversation. It helps that when we are all trying to talk to a number of people, that we make sure that we have the same message and we're consistent in what we're saying for the community. And so that means, again, the wrap is, it's like your script, your organizing script of what you say. And because we're saying it's a script, we're literally going to share with you the language that you can use to have a conversation and share a script that you can use. And again, because this information is a transferable skill, you'll be able to plug in whatever. So be it redistricting, be it census, be it organizing for a particular like thing or in your community, you can reuse these types of scripts and conversations. Slide.
Wow, Ria, those are some fancy changes you made in this PowerPoint.
Make it exciting.
Ria was like, Julio, you're gonna be so excited about the changes, and they're very good up to now. So as Ria said, the wrap is really a structure on how to talk to people. And it is a funny thing because it is as structured as it is unstructured. After you get a feel for it, it's very easy. And it's funny because with organizers I work with all the time, they're like, Julio, you're just organizing me. And it's just because it becomes the norm. The wrap has 5 parts that we usually do. We're going to go through them slide by slide, but I'm just going to go through them as a whole right now. And then we'll practice them. Through this, we're going to have Ria and I'm going to be interviewing Ria. So one thing I want to do is to make sure that what Ria said, like the most important thing to bring people in is to make sure that we're actively listening, that you're validating what people say. And remember, validating doesn't mean that you're agreeing. It means that you are assuring people that you're listening and making sure that people know that you're actively and very much intentionally listening to what they're saying. So we're going to start with an introduction. There is a rule here, and it's a very important rule. Organizing conversations are 70-30. And unfortunately, we have too many people to ask questions, but in the chat, can somebody tell me what 70-30 means if you're doing an organizing conversation? Let's see if anybody gets it. 70-30 in an organizing. Exactly, Carolyn. So we're going to be listening 70% of the time, and we're going to be talking 30% of the time. This is very important. To do that, we're going to start with a very short introduction that Ria is going to go through right now, where we're going to focus on urgency, on who you are. We want to make sure that people know who we are, what we're doing, and why we're having that conversation. Then we're going to get the story. Like Ria said, we're going to be listening for issues. And the way we do that is by asking many questions, by getting that person's picture and understanding it. After that, we're going to agitate them, because in many cases, people are just like living their lives in their normality of their lives. They don't necessarily see that their lives is bad. They're like, well, this is my situation. So we want to get people into their emotions in a respectful way so that they get into action. Then we're going to say the vision. So they're agitated. They're like, I'm ready. I'm going to throw down. We're not going to give them stuff to do. We're going to tell them why we're here, what's our vision to the world before we do anything. And finally, we're going to ask them questions. And the question is really what we want them to do. And then we're going to do a follow-up plan. We're going to get them to a point where they're ready to take action with us, and they're doing it with a plan. And Ria, you can start with the introduction. So next slide, please.
That's really my favorite animation, y'all. So if I can, will somebody please volunteer to read this slide for me? Can somebody unmute and read this out loud for everyone, if you're able to?
Hi, my name is Tanja, and I'm an organizer with Food Equality. May I speak with Jan? Oh, great. I'm here to talk to you about redistricting, which is the process by which our states determine our representation in Congress, and why it's so important to get involved. that's why I wanted to stop by and talk to you about what are the things you need in your community. So let's
That's
talk.
perfect. That was fantastic. Thank you. That's exactly what your introduction should have, Tanya. So what you would do is say, you introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. If you care to share those, you can say you're an organizer with the name of your organization. Generally, you have a target who you're trying to reach. So you can say that person, or you can ask whomever it is that you're trying to reach in the household. This is like if you're at a door or if you're on the phone, it's the same conversation, right? And so then you explain to them what your reasoning for the conversation is and why you have like come to their house, or why you're calling on their phone to find out what exactly they feel about this particular issue. Do they have thoughts on it? What are their thoughts? Have they talked to other people in their community? You really want to like let them know that you're trying to find out exactly, you're there because something urgent is happening and you need to share that with them. And so yeah, what I always do is I like to introduce myself and talk about, kind of try to build urgency. The introduction should not be very long. It should be like 30 seconds. And the reason is because when in that 30 seconds, you're going to capture people's attention or you're going to lose it. And you want somebody who like is listening to what you're saying and not really distracted. So it's important that you hit the high notes and try to get their attention immediately. Like, and also you want to be, have high energy. One of the things I also I recommend to folks, which sounds really like corny, right, is that when you're talking to somebody, if you have a smile on your face, you can hear it in your voice. And so you always, just like we heard from Tanya, like I knew she was smiling when she was reading it because I could hear the lift in her voice. Like, hi, my name is Ria. I'm an organizer with the Center for Popular Democracy. And so because we're not trying to get anything from anybody in a monetary way or anything like that, what you're doing is just introducing what's happening and what exactly you would like to talk to them about, and being pretty clear so that they know that you're not messing around or trying to waste their time. Julio?
And there's like two quick questions on the chat. I would say that any organizing conversation, it doesn't matter if you're asking for money or not, you want to start it in this way. You want to be clear about why you're there, and you want to be clear about what your objectives are. But in reality, the most important thing is that you come in a spirit of talking to the person, listening to the person before getting anything.
Yeah. So in the story, when you're trying to ask questions to, actually, there's one other question that I wanted to answer before we moved on. It says, what is the assignment for white, high income, high education folks for redistricting, uplifting historically excluded communities, and not testifying? I think that's a great question. I think that it is important for you to raise up the communities who are most marginalized, and share these resources with those communities. But also, I don't have a position on whether you should testify or not. I tend to think more people trying to testify in the commissions when everybody is using the same message is actually really powerful. And you want to have a diversity of people who are presenting. And then so when you're having your organizing conversations, you want to ask these particular questions to identify what the issues are. So you ask somebody, how long have you been in Rosewood community? What type of work do you do? Do you have kids? What improvements would you like to see in your city or community? If there was one thing you could change about your community, what would that be? How does that affect your life? Some of the other questions I found are really helpful in redistricting questions are asking people what is it that they want to see in their neighborhood? Are there, do you have grocery stores in walking distance? Do you have parks in your neighborhood? What is it that folks are trying to, what is their piece that really like connects them to where they live, their community, and how you can actually listen to what their answers are to help identify that. Like if you ask somebody, you know, how close is a grocery store in your neighborhood? They might tell you like, well, actually I have to go, you know, 5 or 10 or 5 miles or something like that, like really far away from my home. And so there isn't a grocery store in walking distance. And that's something that when you're listening to folks, you can come back and you can ask them, you can use that as part of your and agitation later in the conversation. Slide.
And let's stay at the story part so we can do some practicing. So maybe go back for a second. Two things on that I'm seeing in the chat that I wanted to note. The first one is that this is kind of a model script, so you should create it based on what your needs of your community are. The second thing is that I've trained many organizers, and the kind of like the inclination is to start giving information, and that is a huge no-no. The most important thing when you're doing an organizing conversation is to focus on the 70-30. Focus on making sure that you're listening to people. I would say also on your Nyoka, you were asking about hanging up. You know, we will get people that hang up, and then you'll have 3,000 people to call. And if 3 people hang up, that's fine. But generally, if you are asking questions in a polite way, in a respectful way, that doesn't happen. And if it happens, then you hang up and you keep walking. But this is a tried and true method to do this. So one thing we wanted to do is, because we have so many people, we wanted to do an organizing conversation and go part by part. So I wanted to start just by doing an interview to Ria. And one thing we wanted to do for this part specifically is do a chat. What's it called, Ria, when you drop a bunch of things in the chat?
Oh, an icebreaker kind of.
Yeah, a chat fall. It's called a chat fall. Okay, so I'm gonna start by asking a bunch of questions to Ria, and what I want you all to do is help me out. So the rule is that there are never enough questions. You want to get as much as you can so that you can understand people's issues. So what I want you all to do is to make sure you never take notes. That's very important. Don't have anything in your hands when you're having an organizing conversation. You want to focus on the person. I need you all to help me with questions. So can you all take 2 minutes, like 1 minute, to think about questions you would ask when you're talking to this person? And the rule here is, don't focus on redistricting, focus on people's lives. And generally, there are 3 things people care about in their lives, which are easy. In the pandemic, we saw them. It's health, it's money, and it's family. So if you were interviewing anybody, what are the questions you would ask beyond the ones that are there? I'll give you 2 minutes to drop some questions, and then I'll start interviewing Ria. And don't be shy, because if not, I'll fail with my interview.
So what questions would you think that you should ask people about, like when you're trying to not pry, but you're trying to get to identifying what their issues are?
Those are awesome questions. I love them.
Yeah, these are great questions in the chat, y'all.
I've never done this on Zoom, and it's awesome. I like it. You all are guinea pigs.
Oh, there's some really good questions in the chat. Yes.
I know.
I'm going to share some of the questions that I see just so that folks can, if they're not able to access the chat. It says, are you and your family okay from the COVID-19 pandemic? Are you a longtime member of this community? Where do your kids go to school? What would make your life happier for you regarding your community? And I think one of my favorites so far is, do you think that your congressman is accessible to your questions? That's a great question.
It's a little bit agitational, but I'll take it.
I love it.
Okay, so I'm gonna take your questions and I'm gonna start doing an interview with Ria. I will start with the introduction. So hi, my name is Julio and I'm an organizer with the Center for Popular Democracy. May I speak with Ria?
This is Ria.
Hey Ria, awesome to meet you. I'm here just to talk to you about redistricting. You know, it's a process by which our state determine our representation in Congress. And as you know, that's very important and why we all need to get involved. I just wanted to stop by, talk about the, you know, all the things that kind of you need in your community. So it's really important that I get a chance to talk to you. So can you, can we take 5 minutes to have to talk to me for a little while?
Yeah, I think I'm a little busy, but I might have a few minutes.
Awesome, Ria. Ria, and how long have you been here in the state of Connecticut?
I've been in this community for the last 5 years.
That's awesome. And what do you like about the community?
There's a lot of green space. I like that it's pretty close to my job, and my kids go to school around the corner.
And do you live alone? Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have kids, and my partner and we have children and dogs.
That's awesome. And I'm guessing they're on break right now.
Yeah, everybody's at home, so it's really a lot is happening.
Are they behaving or are they running around?
I mean, everybody's running around, but it's, fun times.
That's awesome. And do you like their school? Like, do you feel like, you're in a space where they get good education?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I like their school for the most part. There are some things that I would like to see, especially after the pandemic, but it's okay.
And how has the pandemic been? How have you felt? Like, have you felt like you've been able to get like all the support you need in this moment?
I think the pandemic was a challenge, but we were mostly okay. We went to the food bank a couple of times at a nearby church, but yeah, it was mostly okay.
That's great to hear. And do you think there's been like, are there things that you feel like could be better in your community? Like, is there things that you feel like, you have a space to have a voice and be able to share your concerns in the place you live in?
I mean, I'm a part of my neighborhood homeowners association and I vote, but I don't really get involved other than that.
Yeah. And are there things that worry you with your kids' educations? Things that you think could be better in your community?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We need better representation in Congress.
Well, that actually good to hear. And what do you think we need better representation in Congress?
Yeah, I think that right now, they're not, our Congress people don't actually realize that they work for us. And so it feels like they're not really, connected. But what does all of this have to do with redistricting?
Well, I wanted to, first of all, like learn a little bit about you and learn about the things that you care about. Because redistricting is at the core of that, which is why I just, wanted to listen to you. How many times do people come to your door and actually ask you questions about how you are and how's your life in the community?
Yeah, not really, not very often, actually.
That's awesome. So I'll stop it there because we need to kind of move on. What I did there was like a fair answer redirect. So she came with an objection and I literally like validated it and threw it back to her, which is something that organizers do. It feels like a lot, but in my experience, people just want to talk. Like people don't mind talking and they are happy to kind of share. And as long as you kind of dig and keep digging, you will find, I didn't, but you will find that there are things that Ria really cares about. And those are the things like she talked about representation in Congress, which all like means that there are very specific things that she wants to dig into.
Yeah. And so the other thing is that like when you're having organizing conversations, it really leans on you being personal with somebody, being like using what you hear from the conversations to continue the conversation going. And it does seem like at first it might seem a little uncomfortable to be asking people questions. And, we all have a tendency to think that, oh, like, someone is trying to be intrusive and why do they want to know this information? But when you're talking to people, people can see in your face whether or not you care. People, if they've stopped to make time to talk to you, they can see in the way that you have a conversation with them, how respectful of you are of listening to what they're saying and framing that back to them. That all goes into having this conversation and getting the part of the story during your introduction.
Yeah. And this is the tricky part. If you're a like first time organizer and you're doing the streets, like what I usually tell people is like, think about it if you were talking to your neighbor, like a conversation with your neighbor is like, how are you? How are the kids? Like, how are things going? We all know that this past year has been difficult. And really like redistricting is connected to the lives of people. So the more we can connect it to like how your community and things around you could be better, the more you can talk about how your representation could make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see and yes, it is hard and sometimes it feels unnatural, but that's part of why we practice it. Even for me, that I haven't done this in a little while. And I have organizers that are much better than me at this point. Let's go to the next slide. Awesome. So I was talking to Ria and I'm sure you all saw that Ria was like, okay, well, this is fine. And why are you talking to me? The idea is that you dig enough that you actually get people to start like finding things that are bugging them. A lot of people are like a little bit scared about this part, about the agitation part, because it's really when you get people into their emotions. Getting people into their emotions doesn't mean that you go into people's traumas, and that's very important. We want to be very respectful to people's experiences and lives, and we want to, and this part is important because it really gets you to the point where if you're doing your job well, at the end, people will say the three magic words. What can I do? Like if a person, which is four, which a person says that, in the moment a person actually says, how can I get involved? What can I do? You know that you're in a position where people are gonna be able to get involved. And there are two ways to agitate people, and they're fairly easy. Well, there's three. Let's do three. The first way to agitate people is to repeat what they're saying. Literally, it's so basic. If somebody like Ria is saying, I don't feel like people are listening to me in Congress, you can say, Ria, you just told me that you don't feel like people are listening to you in Congress. And then you do the second thing, the second trick when you're doing an organizing conversation. You talk about fairness. Is it fair that people in Congress are not listening to you when you're paying taxes, when you're an active member of your community? So first tactic, first way of doing it, repeat what they're saying. It's the easiest thing and it gets people really mad. And look at it this way. I always say that this is like when, I don't know if you've ever had a friend that has a really, really bad boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're like, this person is like the worst shit in the world. And then, but that person doesn't kind of realize it. And then suddenly you start like talking to that person and you're like, Ria, do you like understand that your boyfriend did this and this and this and this and this? And you get them to the point where they can see their picture. They can see how things are. That really helps. So the second thing is fairness. You can repeat whatever the person said and be like, is that fair? Like, is it fair that your congressperson doesn't pick up the phone? Is it fair that, there are better schools in Fairfield than there are in Bridgeford, Connecticut? I'm using Bridgeford because I live there. Is it fair that like your kids don't have any childcare in this moment and they're running around while they have to work? All of those things with what they said. And the last thing, which is the technique that is the hardest, but it's also very effective, is talking about what if. So you talk about fairness, which is in the present, and then you can talk about what if, which is in the future, which means what would happen if anything happened. So Ria, you were saying that you are scared like about losing like childcare benefits in this moment. Like what would happen if you lost those child benefits to your family? What would happen if you lost, like if another person came in, or you lost your representation in Congress and a person that you don't like started getting there? So
Right.
this is a moment where you do three things. You repeat, you talk about fairness, which is in the now. You say, is it fair? All these things that are happening, are they fair? And then finally, what would happen? What would happen, once again, this is something that you have to do with care and with love. You do it in a way where people are kind of like understand that you're not saying this is gonna happen. You just make them think about what are the things that are gonna happen. And why do we do this? Because there's no movement without emotion. People can see their lives, they can be mad about it, but if they're not mad about it, and if they're not ready to move, they're not gonna do it. So I'll do a quick overview with Ria. So Ria, you were telling me about your congressional member, and you were saying that that you don't necessarily feel that they're listening to you. Do you think that's fair?
No, it's not fair. It makes me angry.
Yeah. Do you think like, do you think it's fair that like you vote every year, and that now they might even like change your representation and cut your representative district, and how that could have impacts in like the services your children receive?
Yeah, like it makes, so what I've realized is that I've heard they're trying to redraw the lines, and so I'm wondering who is going to end up being my representative after, and if they're going to be more attentive than the person that I have now.
Yeah. And have you heard about this guy, that Demastrio? I'm making this up. Who might like come in, and apparently he doesn't care about any of like the pandemic support, and he's been saying some crazy stuff on social media. Like, what would happen if those people came in and they were the ones that were actually like running the show?
I would feel even more despair that I feel now about the position I have to move my members of Congress.
Yeah. And do you personally feel like you have the power to do something like?
I mean, not by myself, right? Um, I I don't know. Like I mean, I think I vote, I try to participate, but I mean, I don't know if I could do anything by myself.
But do you think if we come together and we work together, like, do you feel like like there's a way in which we can like throw down together and make a change?
Well, my neighbor and I talked about it the other day. We were talking about just how this race is really wild and we don't know what's going to happen. So I feel like we could, maybe us together, a couple people on my street. I don't know.
That's awesome. So this is like this is why it's important to understand the issues, because I don't understand Ria's issues, so it's difficult for me to move her. But at least she's like thinking about how she can get involved. If the person is like really mad about like the issue you got, so if I know that Ria's children are about to like lose their childcare services, and I'm like, what would happen if that happens? And she's like, I don't know, but I need to do something.
Right.
That is like a great moment to kind of like segue into the next part of the. But right now, like Ria's interested, Ria wants to learn more, Ria wants to figure out how to get involved. So we can move to the next part, which is the vision. So next slide. Those are good questions, Lean. I love that people keep asking questions in the chat. You all are better organizers than I am. But yeah, that's it. That's the idea. Like the story is really about learning the picture. The agitation is really throwing that picture out there, so there's some emotion that comes out. So now we're in the vision. So the person, we did a short introduction. The person knows why we're there. We got their story. They're agitated and ready to do something. And now we want to talk about what we want to talk about our vision. Mm-hmm. A lot of organizers skip this part, and they just go into like, let's just ask questions. It's very important that we, as people that are doing work in communities, share why we do this work and why we believe in this vision. So Ria, maybe you can read this for us.
Sure. So you told me that you wanted better healthcare for your community. We know that these are hard times and we need the right people to represent us to ensure that we have a voice in the decisions that are being made. Redistricting determines who will represent our community in Congress, and this process is is led by our legislature, who will determine how our state draws the maps of representation. So if this is done well, it means that people like us will be able to have more power. If it's not done well, it could mean that we lose important representation in Congress. The good thing is we are not alone. We are connected to many people in the community that have the same concerns. And we are ready to come together to support each other and demand a fair and equitable redistricting process. We have a choice. We can stay home and let others make decisions for us, or we can show up and demand the resources that our community needs and deserves. Can we count on you to work with us to make sure that redistricting results in a process that ensures fair representation for our community?
That was awesome, Ria. Thank you. So that's the vision. Like the idea with the vision is that I just had a conversation with Ria. Ria is saying that she's worried about childcare in her community. Ria is saying that she cares about healthcare, and you want to bring those things in to talk about the big kind of overview. I think once again, this is a suggested script for every community is going to be different. You all are going to focus on different things, but the core thing here is that they're like the vision is the place where you talk about how your organization creates change and how we can come together and create change. Then the last part with the it's what it's called framing the choice, and this is very important. You want to get people to think about what are the choices, and the choices are simple. You can do nothing, and then other people make decisions for you, or you can actually do something and be involved, and maybe things are better. So at the end, we want to make sure that the vision is very much forcing people to make a choice. And sometimes they're like, no, thank you. But the hope is that if they're agitated and they're ready, they will be ready to kind of like join the movement. And Ria, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, can you hit the next slide, please? So I think that's exactly it, Julio, is that after we talk about the vision, and the vision is not just something that organizations come up with, but it's a shared agreement with the community so that it is something that everybody has bought into, everybody feels impacted by that. And after you share the vision, the next thing you do, somebody who's agitated is going to say, okay, what can I do? Like, you have told me about this, you found out like what's going on. What can I do to help? How can I get involved? And that's the plan to win. And the plan to win, folks need to show up and make their voices heard. So that's through phone banking, participating in community meetings or hearings, canvassing their neighborhood or other neighborhoods in their district, or using social media to share out what they know about redistricting through the organizing process that you've taught them. And then hopefully you will have resources that you can share with them so they can put things on their social, and they can be able to, like I said, contribute to some phone banking. And this is a great script. What we've created on the slides here is a great script for you to be able to use in phone banking. And then also keeping in mind that when you're doing community meetings, you want to make sure that everybody is on message, everybody is on point and saying the same things, because repetition is going to increase the power that you have. And so what we're going to do really quickly is we are going to have some breakouts, and we are going to, I hope you guys you all are enjoying these animations. So we're gonna have some breakouts, and you all are gonna practice giving a rap to each other. So Alicia's gonna drop the rap in the chat, and you can go ahead and click on that, and that will pull up the literal word by word verbatim rap that you can give somebody. But if you feel comfortable and you feel like you understand, feel free to give it your own pizzazz and go ahead and make it your own and practice. And it's okay. Everybody's not going to do like fantastic or perfect on the first time, but this is not how you're not supposed to get it right on the first time. You're supposed to learn from each conversation that you have. So we're going to go into breakout groups for about 7 minutes. And then we'll come right back and answer some of the questions in the chat.
So folks should have received a pop-up on their screen inviting them to join a breakout room. You can just click the blue button that says join breakout, and that will send you into your room so you can practice. Hi, I see a number of folks who have remained in the main room. If you have questions or need help getting to your breakout room, please let me know. So I'm seeing folks starting to trickle back in. Would love to hear what folks thought of that experience and getting that practice. We have just a couple of minutes left, but if folks want to share in the chat what they learned, what was hard, what was easy, or raise your hand and share some takeaways, that would be great. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you. So what are the types of things that folks would like to share?
Do you want us to speak?
Yeah, sure. You can unmute, share what you learned, what was
Okay.
you found easy, what was challenging.
I wasn't a participant. I was a listener in our group, but I kept thinking it'd be easier if I could see them while we're talking. You know, I think it'd be easier face to face than on a phone. You could see their reaction better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think about being able to have these in-person conversations, but sometimes when we like, and especially now, we have to try to make whatever we can work. So sometimes over the phone we'll have to do, and you just have to try to convey that warmth and that care through the phone. But that's a good point.
I wanted to say that, and I was mostly a listener too, but the hardest part for me was connecting a person's issues. And in this case, I got the impression that our interviewee had views that were in the minority in her community. So she was in favor of environmental protections and public education. And I had the sense that her neighbors were not in favor of those things, but connecting it in an effective way to redistricting, and then also connecting the redistricting as a process to potential or actual changes. There's no way to guarantee that redistricting is going to result in these improvements. So I'd like you to address that, because it is such a, in some ways, abstruse kind of process, and it doesn't have any kind of immediate, and often it doesn't have an immediate result. Of course, sometimes it has immediate bad results. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if Julio, if you're okay with me taking this, I think that I hear what you're saying about not actually seeing immediate results, and how do you make that connection with folks. But I do actually think that having a part and drawing your maps means that you're going to be able to affect the outcome. I'm seeing it happen in Ohio with some of the organizing groups who have already started and are really far along in their process, right? They're using media, they're using toolkits, they're using case studies, they're using all of this information to help talk to people, and also to help use that to draw the maps, so that when the independent commissions are, put together, or even if they're appointed by legislators in some space, we get to participate in the process. That doesn't often happen. And when a community comes together with a unified message, that forces members, legislators, to pay attention, because it's not just one person. It's not just a one-off. It's every, a consistent line of people with a message that everyone is repeating, and showing that there is strength in numbers. And then the other thing is that people only become like empowering someone to recognize what power they have in their community can change someone's lives. And so I think that a lot of times when we tend to think like, I'm one person, what can I do? And that's fine. But as one person, you can organize your neighbor. As one person, you and your neighbor can organize your block. As one person, you, your neighbor, and your block can organize your community. Like, you can continue to have a snowball effect of organizing, so to speak, if people know that there is change that can be made. And again, it may seem lofty, but I think it's possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think I want to validate what you're saying, because redistricting is hard. Telling people what redistricting is hard. But I think we can get to the core of it, which is how do we make sure the people that are representing us are the right people? And how do we have a voice in that process? And how do we use the issues this person is talking about to kind of connect it to that? Do you feel represented? Do you have a voice? Were you able in the last year, when there was a pandemic, when you needed the support from your government, to have the support you need? Did you ever actually get a call from your representative or your school board or all the other places where these decisions are made? I think we are thinking on a national level, but many people in this call have talked about how locally this is important. And the more local you can be about how these people are going to make decisions that are going to impact your life, the more people are going to be oh shit, I should get involved. I should at least learn about this. And I think that's where it starts. And you get from 30 conversations, 2 people that are yeah, let's do it. That's a win. That's where you start. We have 2 million people, and you get whatever, 10% of people, you can throw down, you can win.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I wanted to recognize that it is 8 o'clock, and I understand that others probably have maybe things planned, but I know that I'm available to hang out for a little bit longer if others are interested in doing so as well. There were a couple things that were elevated in the chat that I wanted to raise. One being, I saw this come up in multiple times, which is around the question of, who are you having these conversations with, and thinking about who are you organizing? And Ria or Julio, do you want to kind of give that initial outline?
Yeah, sure. People who may be not generally involved in the process. So it can be literally a community, it could be a neighborhood, but it can also be like people you go to church with, people you work with, people who use the same grocery store as you regularly, right? People who you may not necessarily know. So it's a really good idea to like think about what you're trying to target, who you're trying to target, like whether it's a particular like physical neighborhood or a particular type of issue person that you're looking for. And so it's, I think it matters about what your strategy is for making, what your theory of change is for making change in your community. And so it matters about who you're trying, how that will matter about how you try to reach folks. Julio, do you have any thoughts?
This is very much to talk to people. Like, this is not to talk to your elected. This is to talk to your neighbor. This is to talk to whoever you want to move in a moment. And it is very much like talking to your neighbor. It's just a structure that helps you be better. And I would say, like, the most important thing with an organizing conversation, it is not an organizing conversation if you don't have a clear ask in the end. You want to get to the point, and if you do your steps and you agitate and you give the vision, at the end you want to be like, join a phone bank tomorrow, we're going to be calling this person. You want to make sure, and then you want to make sure you call them, you have a plan of action. I'm going to call you tomorrow at 8, and this is how we're going to follow up. So just things I wanted to add around like how to do this more effectively.
Yeah, follow through is super important. When you say you're going to call, when you say you're going to show up, you really need to do that, because part of it is you're building trust with your community. You're building trust with people so that they can believe that they can win, right? Like, we're all just hoping that we can participate in this process and make change. So that's how we do it. That's how we make change, by following up and following through and staying in touch with people. And then once they do one thing, ask them to do something else. If they do a phone bank, ask them if they'll go out to a canvas. If they go out to a canvas, ask them if they'll do a hearing and speak in front of the independent commissions. So yeah, thanks, folks. Are there any other questions that folks might have, burning questions before we disembark? So the script is in the chat, and we'll also be emailing the slides to you all. And then on the 17th of July, we're going to do a train the trainer. So for organizations who want to learn how to train people to be organizers in their community, we can follow, like, make sure you pay attention to the charge calendar, because there will be another registration for folks who want to learn how to train folks to be organizers of their community. Thanks so much for your time, and y'all have a good night. Yes, July 17th. Sorry about that. Thanks, Larry.